All right, let's get going. So, if you could take a look over here, and I want you to pick one habit that you can take on for the rest of this month, just this month. And if you could use the chat and give me a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being I'm not too confident I can do this, and 5 being I'm really confident I can keep up with this, of doing this habit every single day for the rest of that month. What's your score out of 5? Just pick one. Now, what if I asked you in the next month, so the month of May, keep that first habit, but now I want you to pick another one, and I want you to keep both habits with you every day for the rest of the second month. How likely are you to do that? How confident do you feel about it? Let me tell you, if it's about calling my mother, I do not like my chances whatsoever. Now, what if I asked you to do all 12 of these things? And the reason why I bring this up is because I came upon this relatively crazy stat that I still can't believe, and I'm still triple checking and quadruple checking because I still can't believe it. And that is about how much change the average employee actually experiences in a year. And by enterprise change, we're talking about, new system, software, or maybe we're going to move into greater client centricity, a sort of a big shift, a big enterprise change. And in 2016, believe it or not, that feels like yesterday, even though that is now 11 years ago. That was two. That was just two. So two big changes a year. Now in 2025, how many do you think that actually is? I know. And now imagine everything I just asked of you. 12 new habits over the course of the year, plus one more actually. And that's a pretty ridiculous stat when you really think about it in terms of how we are approaching and asking people to change at work all the time. And in fact, this is an extended part of the study from the Gardner piece that I got in over here, is that as we talk through how much of that volume of change goes up, that willingness of change goes down as well too, quite naturally. Why? Because people are overwhelmed by change, but also they're tired by mismanaged change. And so Gardner calls that the transformation deficit of what we're really trying to do. It's not even just the volume, but it's also about the willingness of change to go down as well too. And if you think that's a lot of change, you can just imagine actually what's going on in the minds of our business leaders and our CEO, who equally don't really know how to navigate any of this. In fact, 45% of CEOs believe their company will not actually be economically viable in 10 years. Or 63% of business leaders see highly turbulent times ahead. This was a report that was taken actually before the events of the last month or so. And so you can imagine the outlook is more ambiguous than ever and more uncertain than ever. And on top of that, there's still this high volume of change. And let's not forget that actually at the center of it are just people who at home are going through this mass uncertainty. We're still in this high cost of living era of inflation. There's war, there's more war. It's almost like we've even forgotten about climate change that's looming all over it. We're still trying to recover from the post-pandemic era. And well, there's this piece in our digital lives too that just kind of keeps itching on who we are, both at home and at work. It's no coincidence that you feel that your favorite platforms are kind of eroding. They have a term for it, pardon my French, but it's called enshittification. Look it up. It's really interesting. That's just what's happening at home. And at work, well, we are also trying to recover from the pandemic and try to recapture that productivity lost as organizations. There's more return to work mandate. This always on change, 13 pieces of change every year. And organizations are looking at AI as this amazing value creation opportunity. But on the flip side at work, people and the rise of the EVP, quiet quitting, more values, more connection. Well, simultaneously, we also have a disengagement crisis. We have a loneliness epidemic. People are more lonely at work than ever. And from the employer's standpoint, sure, value creation, but is AI going to take my job? Now imagine this as the backdrop to every single one of your people in your organization who are just, well, trying to drown out all that noise. And that's something we really need to keep close to us as we're trying to imagine what change really looks and feels like. Because from a top-down level, we think change is this, a simple flick of the switch. But what that actually ends up looking is something more like that. Yes, that's my favorite meme. Not going to be the last time you see it, probably in any webinar you see of mine too. Very apropos for the times. So the world is in a constant state of change. Organizations are in a constant state of change. And then there's us, wedged in the middle, just figuring out how are we supposed to be okay with any of this. And if there's one thing I need you to walk away from today is that in this year, in this exact moment, change management is certainly not an initiative. It's just a way of operating. And helping your people navigate this, giving them the skills, giving them the environment, giving them the right experiences to navigate all of this is going to be the most important thing you do this year. And I think by you being here, you probably recognize that already. So let's talk about that. But first, hello everyone, my name is Josh. I'm the Chief and Creative Learning Officer for Sponge Group. I've been lucky to have quite a lot of amazing roles and opportunities in my career, tackle a bunch of different clients with industries and complex challenges, and take on topics from everything from digital transformation to tire physics. Let me tell you, you haven't really lived until you've done a module on tire physics, so I have a lot of empathy for our engineers and technical SMEs out there. Tough topic to handle. My MO is more than anything to help organizations and its leaders understand how you can unlock learning to be a real catalyst for impact. A couple of personal anecdotes. That's a picture of the greatest meal I ever had in my life. Cost me less than $10, and it was a ramen shop in Tokyo. If I had to pick one, that's my favorite Beatles album. And I am part of an elite secret club. Well, not so secret, but certainly an elite club of Duolingo power users in the 0.5% or something like that of Duolingo users. And my current streak is 2,700 plus days on Duolingo. Happy to talk about that and quite tied to actually what I'll be talking about today. And I want to spend the rest of the time today really talking about change meeting people enablement in the context of learning and why it's so important for what you need to try and accomplish with your org today. All right, I'm an incredibly verbose person if you haven't figured that out yet. And so we've got a lot to get through and we will get through it. I want to talk about our always on change world. You've got a preview of that. And more than anything, I just want to collide the ideas of the best of change management meeting the best of people enablement. So really just going to be sharing best practices, how they come together into a practical playbook. So I'm going to leave you with something very tactical you can use tomorrow. And just leave you with great resources. Always good to just leave with great resources. I'm packing a lot into a small window and there's a lot behind me that you should unpack. And probably the biggest idea I want you to walk away from today is cross the line. What does that mean? We're going to find out. Also some sub goals, some kind of personal selfish ones. Hopefully you'll walk away understanding that everything's about change management. In preparation for this webinar, I've kind of broken myself a little bit, and now I only see the world through change and the lens of change. A lot to explain through change management. Hopefully I give you that bug as well too. And also another sort of secret quest for me is that hopefully I get you always thinking about elephants. All right, let's get going. So let's talk about, as I mentioned before, really setting the scene of what are some of the great ideas about change and how can that inform what we do every day. And I wanted to share this, and when I first read it, I kind of had this moment as well too. And you know, I'm a business leader, and we tackle our own sort of change management as well too, like in any org. But when I saw this for the first time, it kind of just set everything in motion for me. Of like, oh, and that is that change management in a business context is really common. In fact, there's 5 typical quests. And I love the language of quests because I'm a gamer, and questing is all about taking on those hard, complex, open world challenges. Every organization tackles 5 basic quests: global presence, customer focus, nimbleness, innovation, and sustainability. And what that essentially means is that it's a reconfiguration of your operating model, of your customer experience, your business process, your R&D partners, and well, even your resources. Now think about for a second something that you're going through yourself in terms of change. So think of a change initiative that's happening, that's live. Can it fit into any of these? Are you tackling more than one quest? Because that's often a typical one as well too, is that sometimes orgs spend too much energy chasing multiple quests at once. And I think the piece here to really understand is that change is actually really, really common. Don't feel like this is new or novel. They've been studying change management for, well, basically since the industrial age. And so think about what type of change you're focusing on in your organization and what that reconfiguration means. So on one side, change is incredibly common, but the other side of it is, well, that doesn't make it any easier. And I just had to share this stat when I found it about people who underwent a major life event. And if anyone know anyone in your life or loved ones who have gone through some form of heart bypass surgery or angioplasty, you know it's a big deal. But only 10% of people who go through this major life event actually make major modifications to their diets. And it just goes to show you that no matter how powerful the moment is, it doesn't make that shift to change any easier. And there's a big reason behind this. And well, I told you I'd start thinking and talking about elephants, and this is where we begin. And that is a huge reason behind what I really consider the most powerful piece of change management. And that is understanding the elephant and the rider. Now, if you don't know what that concept is, it's by Jonathan Haidt, sort of a social psychologist, pop psychologist, wrote a fantastic book and came up with the concept of the elephant and the rider as a way to explain how the brain works. Very similar to Daniel Kahneman's System 1, System 2, but a little bit more elegant story. And I'll botch it a little bit, but you feel free to look into the details a little bit later on. But he said, think of our minds, how we make decisions, as a rider sitting on top of an elephant. The rider is the rational, logical one, is the one that tells us, to drink lots of water in a day and to eat healthy. But the elephant is the emotional, the intuitive, the irrational one, the one that's driven by motivation, by emotions. The elephant is the one that presses the snooze alarm every single day. And when we make decisions, we are making decisions together, both as the elephant and the rider. And when you put that in the context of the quote that I just shared with you, is that it's easy to tell someone who's had a major life event, oh, well, you should adjust your diet. That's speaking to the rider. But what's the elephant really want to do? And just to contrast a little bit about the elephant and the rider, as I mentioned, is that rational, analytical one. They guide the journey. So they're actually steering. Well, we should go there. We should go there. They crave that direction, but simultaneously struggle with ambiguity. The elephant, on the other side, is that emotional, instinctual side. The elephant loves stories, and they power the journey, not necessarily guide it. But they crave motivation, not necessarily direction. The elephant, of course, prefers the default path. If you ever tried to move an elephant, it's very difficult to do. Not that I've ever tried to do one myself, but they want to stay in their lane. They want to do what they want to do. So actually moving the elephant into a new direction that the rider tries to do sometimes, it's really difficult. And that's why ultimately it's the elephant that gets us where we want to go. Now, in the business world, we're really guilty of speaking just to the rider. Do this, do that, everything goes well. But my argument really is that the business world, and certainly now in these times, we need more elephant content than ever. So as you walk away from today, really think about, where's the elephant present in everything that I do? Because if we just stick to the rider, it's not a recipe for success. Now, this is such a powerful concept that actually one of the big books in change management, Switch, written by the Heath brothers, they took the entire concept of elephant and the rider and they plotted a playbook around it. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking through it because I think it's really important to call out some of the key moments here. So they speak of it in three phases. The first being direct the rider. So how do you speak to the rider? Well, you follow the bright spots. Tell me what's already working. This one's a really critical one. Script the critical moves. So it's not just about big ambitions. It's about, tell me those little steps that I need to go next. Get me motivated. Give me direction. I need really specific direction. So how do you script the critical moves? We'll come back to that in a second. The second part of that then is, of course, motivate the elephant. And motivating the elephant is really different from directing the rider. There is language of feeling, something we don't talk a lot about in the business world. How do you find the feeling? What is that moment of feeling? What's the way you're going to inspire, motivate the elephant? And I think the other piece to call it as well too is how we shrink change. You have to convince the elephant that the change is really attainable. The goal is not to climb Mount Everest. Maybe the goal is just, how do we get to base camp 1? And then finally, when you're thinking about the rider and the elephant, the last element is the path that they're on. And so the easiest way to direct the rider and motivate the elephant is to make sure that the path is as easy as possible. And here, one of the biggest call outs is the inclusion of the word habit, not knowledge, habits, and how we need to build better habits. And I just wanted to share this quote, which was really powerful in this particular chapter there on shaping the habit. And that is, when behavior is habitual, it's free in the sense that it doesn't tax the rider. Think about all the positive habits in your day all the time. I'm assuming all of us have good oral hygiene. You brush your teeth every day. You don't think about it. It's just a habit. And what are those action triggers, those key habits that help make that free? Doesn't tax the rider, doesn't tax the elephant. We always want to get to a place of habits. That's the power of change. That's when you know that you've arrived there. Of course, I can't talk about change without talking about one of the best books out there on it, Atomic Habits. If you haven't read it, it's fantastic. It's really accessible as well, too. I wanted to share three powerful concepts from Atomic Habits that really resonate into what it means to build good habits, certainly in the context of change. The first being incremental gains. Coming back to the idea of Mount Everest, don't think about how difficult or how hard the climb is to that change. Just think about being 1% better every day. So if I'm bringing up the example, and I've never climbed Mount Everest, in fact, I have a fear of heights, you'll never catch me climbing Mount Everest. But that 1% gain could be getting my ski gear on, or spending some time in the snow, or maybe just walking up a hill. That's really difficult for me. So that's my 1% piece, walking up the top of a hill. And what does that look like? The second piece really resonates with me, and this is the idea of identity-based habits. What is that? Well, most of the time when we think about goals, think of your New Year resolution. Oh, I want to eat better. That is an outcome-based habit. That is, it almost is putting a line in the sand saying that's a temporary goal. I want to eat better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a process and outcomes that surround me in order to get to that outcome. Identity-based habits is the inverse of that. It's saying to yourself, I eat healthy, or I'm a non-smoker, or I'm a dog lover. And it builds from a place of identity outward into what the outcomes can be. And probably the best way that I can put it is that show me your identity and I'll show you your habits. And so what are the habits that surround your identity and what it looks like? The last one is a particularly powerful one. I mentioned that I have a 2,700-day Duolingo streak. That doesn't happen by accident, and that's actually tied to a lot of habit stacking. So how am I possibly able to do Duolingo every single day? Well, I tie it to habits. So for example, when I put my toddler daughter to bed, the first thing I do when I close that door after I say goodnight, sit on the couch and open Duolingo, because that's my window. That's my only window to be able to consistently do it every time. So I've stacked one habit on another. And so how do you stack habits at work one upon another as well too? Something to think about. So I just wanted to share just a larger context of why habits is particularly important in the context of real meaningful change. I'll come to that a little bit later. And of course, I can't not mention John Cotter's model, who is sort of, well, the visionary, the OG change management person. And I'll just call it one thing here because I don't want to wax poetic about all these amazing ideas, but the piece about a guiding coalition. This cannot be a top-down piece. Number two there, build and maintain a guiding coalition. It just can't feel and it can't be a top-down moment. It needs to come from the group. It needs to come from the people that are most affected by change. Because when you get to something like step 6, celebrating visible, significant short-term wins, it is done by committee, from the committee. So I just really wanted to call that out because it's a powerful way of thinking. You cannot do change in isolation, and you cannot do real change, crossing the line change, which I'll get to in a second, without actually doing it with the people who are going to be most affected by change. Now, that was a whistle-stop tour on Change Management 101, but I think we take a step back and it really makes you think about the simplicity sometimes of how we approach change management and how, well, not simple it is at all. And we think sometimes that, well, we need people to change. It's just simply a knowledge exercise and boom, Bob's your uncle, you're done. When really there's this massive piece in the middle of complex human behavior that we need to target. on feelings, on belief, on action, on, well, getting people to move, speaking to that elephant. And that's the piece that really I want to spend the rest of the today talking about, is just how do we get to that mid piece, that chunky piece, that mid piece over there, where the real change happens and the real catalyst for change happens. And a huge part of it is just thinking about your value system. And show me how you think about change, and I'll show you how you approach change. If you think that change is top down, it's training centric, it's a one-off thing, it's quite linear, well, you'll approach it that way. And I'll show you, in the same way of your identity, I'll show you the habits of what that kind of change looks like. But if you think that change fundamentally is really hard and messy and organic, and it's a little bit of this as opposed to that, well, then you've got a different approach to it. And hopefully I've convinced you that it's a lot more like the right side of the page than the left side of the page. And just a quick reminder of everything that I showed you, at least for me, the 5 big takeaways of what the type of change that you are doing needs to change looks like. First is you got to make people feel something. And this is something that we very quickly forget about when we need to cascade something real quick, speak to the writer, take that 20-page shareholder deck and convert it into something for 5,000 people. You got to move people. You got to make people feel something. And you got to make that change attainable. I told you about building the guiding coalition. You got to enlist the right supporting cast. So think about who is missing as part of your change management plan that you need to include. And by that, I mean the people that are most affected by the change, or the most who need to lead the change. And I mentioned this before, habits, not knowledge. Seems quite simple after I've spoken that way, but we need to resist that temptation of just filling people as knowledge vessels and actually take it a step further and actually extend it a bit further. We know this is hard work, and this is part of scripting those critical moves. This is about taking things to their logical conclusion. We can't just leave it at knowledge. We need to think about how we convert that knowledge into behaviors and habit. And well, in recognition that change is just hard and it takes time, you got to keep the momentum. Now, how about you take a second to look back on that change management initiative that you're currently working through? And why don't we do a real quick checklist? Think about that right now. And let's go through this checklist and see how well you do. So, did your people walk away feeling something? Did the change feel attainable? Did you engage the right audience and co-construct the change journey? Did you focus more on habits versus knowledge? And did you do a good job of sustaining momentum versus just kind of have this be a one-off event? Now, a little bit of a leading survey. If you've got a 5 out of 5, congratulations. You could probably drop off the webinar if you really like. But if you're hanging around in the 1 or 2 region, that's okay. That's most of us, because this stuff is really hard. And hopefully what I can do with the rest of our time today is really help unlock how we can do more of this in a very tactical way. So let's make this actionable. Now, remember that graph that I popped up earlier about just the massive amount of change someone goes through? There's something actually I kind of have a bit of a beef with, and that is those 2 bottom things over there. So Gardner says, hey, well, successful transformation is just change communication, quality delivery and training, and throw in a little bit of fatigue management, and boom, successful transformation. If you ask me, that's quite a writer-centric view of change. And the reason why I don't think it works is that it's, well, overly rational, overly transactional, surprisingly vague, which we know is often a guilty culprit in change management initiatives. And more than anything, it just forgets about people. And I think that the piece that's missing there is that it just fundamentally doesn't cross the line. So, meet the line. On this side of the line, the writer is in control. On the other side of the line, well, that's where the elephant actually endures. This side, we spend a lot of time talking about change, but the actual change happens on that side of the line. None of the change happens here. All of the change happens here. And the challenge with the line is that most orgs stop right there. They don't want to cross over. Why? Well, because that's your realm of control. It's easy to put things into nice, neat little writer packages and to talk about the change that's about to come without actually saying, well, now that we're in the change, now what? And in the area of the elephant is where we need to embrace the messy, the unstructured, the vulnerable pieces of what it means to actually change. And what I want to do is really talk you through what it means to cross the line and how we get there. And this wouldn't be a webinar by me if I didn't try and package things into fancy little Instagrammy things. And so we've got 8 rules to talk through. Doing a quick time check here, and I'm saying, oh boy, how are we going to do it? We are absolutely going to do it, and I'll get you out of here on time. There's a lot behind this, so by all means, feel free to come up to me afterwards, and we can talk about it a bit more. Send me a quick email. I can talk about this stuff for days. So if there's anything that resonates with you, you disagree with, or you fundamentally agree with, I want to hear about it. So the first one is understand the larger landscape of change. Now, I gave you the tiniest preview of what the weight of the world on any single one of us as we approach our organizations and our organizations asking us to change. There's so much change happening in the world right now, but from the everyday what's in the news to what's actually been on the surface building up for the last 5 years even. There's a huge landscape of change we need to address, and we need to be empathetic to that before we put anything else in front of our people. 2, you need to get the marquee why moment right. Now, this is all speaking to that feeling, finding the feeling, the elephant content. This is your key elephant moment. And to just give you a quick example of that, this is a live customer that we're working with right now, a fashion retailer. And this is the components of the plan for the big why moment. And what we're doing here is leveraging, this is tied to a go-to-market launch, we're actually leveraging an influencer network as part of the big why moment. Whether it's a TED Talk style video, whether it's about putting those that can best speak to the change and the why it's there, there is a story for your org on the journey that it's on. You need to tell that story. And this is the creative side of my brain. This is the storytelling side of my brain, is that it needs to be a story. It cannot feel like a stiff PowerPoint deck. Bring that story out, bring out the why, because that's how you get people on board. That's how you get people to believe. So in this case here, it's a blended situation. There's a virtual train the trainer, there's a hybrid session, and we're using the influencers as sort of a key moment to unlock the excitement around what we need to do. So that why moment could look really different for your org, but just to give you a quick example of it. The next one is create room for when it just doesn't go well. And this is the piece here of the writer piece, is that there's this over rationality of, well, just communicate the change and change. That's pretty much how we change, right? It's like, no, it's absolutely not how we change. And anyone who's tried to commit to, and think to the very beginning when I started, your chosen habit, you will have days where you fall down. You will have days where it doesn't go completely well. And so we need to create room as change enablement leaders, how we can actually allow people to fail and fail gracefully and learn from it. And probably the best example I can give of that is this learning framework from Mosher and Gottfredson called the 5 Moments of Need. And a good example actually of the split down the middle of kind of the writer content and the elephant content is that we spend a lot of time focusing on information. First time, learn more. But when things are actually in the flow of work, when things go wrong, when you're trying to remember things, when things change, that is actually when we need to lift people up the most. So a really good example of that, this is again from another sort of live luxury a brand that we're working in right now. We're working with their retail associates to make them into brand ambassadors. And there's a lot to know, and there's a lot to take them on a journey of what it means to be a brand ambassador. So this is a key piece here. We call them customer cards to just help retail associates on the floor remember. And it's the little things there. And that could be a remember piece, or that could also be when things go wrong piece, when you've engaged that customer and you've forgotten all the details about it, and now what do you do? So create that space for when things go wrong, because they should go wrong. It's kind of naive to think that things won't go wrong, but that doesn't mean you turn that into an opportunity of failure, but rather one to support people. The fourth one is document the journey together. Now, it's very easy to think about comms being a key part of change. Yes, there needs to be this initial comms moment. Number 2 is a comms moment. It's about getting that why moment right. But it doesn't stop there. And I think sometimes the naivete is that you get the initial comms done and then the rest takes care of itself. Change is a journey. And you need to document every step of the way. When things go well, when things don't go well, how you showed the bright spots, to bring up the language of switch, how you script the critical moves, how you create space for when things don't go well. All of that needs to be documented. It's such a powerful and vulnerable moment to say, hey, we had a game plan, and 3 months in, we realized that these three things weren't working. Being that vulnerable and sharing it within a common space, a common conversation, just makes a really powerful journey to share with everyone. So make sure you document it, because that's also how you build more buy-in. Remember, the elephant loves to know what the other elephants are doing. So make sure you document in a way that everyone knows how everyone is embracing or struggling with change. Here's a really quick example from a major supermarket retailer. Here, this was part of encouraging people to say, hey, we're all on the journey. And what we actually did was created a dynamic dashboard that showed the people that were signing up for this particular initiative, those that were still waiting, those that haven't even started yet. It's just a tiny little tweak, a little bit gamified, but it was just a way to communicate and show people the journey that they were on, to say, hey, you're not the only one here. Everyone is here too, and everyone is at different parts of the journey, and that's a good thing. So there's lots of different ways you can document the journey, but just wanted to share one quick example with you of how you can keep that sustained. It's not just a one-off moment. All right. This one's going to be a quick one. Point towards habits, not knowledge. Gave you a sneak peek of some of James Clear's great work in Atomic Habits. The hard work here is about stopping at knowledge and recognizing you need to just go a lot further. So this is just some good old-fashioned roll up your sleeves work with the people who are going to be affected by change, with your SMEs, with those that actually need to be in the front line of the change, to say, okay, what does that actually look like for me? And that's the piece of taking sort of, your 10-year strategy or whatever you're trying to do, or the core kind of hallmarks of what that change is, and then really drilling it down. Think about the identity you want to craft as part of this change. I am going to be more customer centric. What are the habits of customer centricity? It's not just the knowledge. What are the habits? What does it look like? What are the artifacts of that change? That's where you really want to extend things to. Now, this is not easy work, but it's incredibly rewarding once you're on the other side of it. 6 is get the balance right between structured and unstructured. And well, this is just a recognition, once again, that change is just an organic process. You can talk to the writer all day, but ultimately you need to create space. And there's a time and place for both formal and informal interventions in the context of change. You need that formal piece to do alignment, to move as one, to set clear expectations. And I think that's sort of our default mode. I think we feel more comfortable in the formal and structured space. But you equally need a lot of informal support as well too, because sometimes you just need to try something. Sometimes you need to fail together. Sometimes you just need the power of the room to tell you where you need to go next. And I think in the context of the amount of change that's put in front of us, you also need to create room for fatigue. You need to create room for people to go, can I have a break here for a second, actually? Because this seems like a lot. And so getting this balance right, and the balance is really up to your org and your culture and how you operate, is really important in the context of change, because change is an organic process. It is not as simple as saying go that way and we just go. Another way to think about this is, what's the relationship between the elephant and the rider here? So get that balance right. And, I say this coming from the world of, building structured formal training. You got to have those informal moments, because they actually create really powerful moments when they're put together. 7, and this is a crucial one, and that is remember the prone points. And when I think about where change management often fails, it is at these two key audiences, management and grassroots. You need to activate your leaders. You need to help them understand what they don't know. You need to factor in that maybe your leaders don't really know how to approach change in the first place and how to navigate change in the first place. So really engaging this critical audience is super important, and you need to really put the magnifying glass, shine the light on that particular audience, because they do need that extra love and care. And the same thing applies for the grassroots level. It is so easy for those that are most affected by change in the front line that by the time the message reaches them, they just go, I don't know what you want me to do with this. You spend a ton of money on a big moment to unveil this change. Everyone in leadership at the top of the house is super excited about it, but by the time it trickles down, people are just like, I don't understand. I don't know what you want me to do. So make sure that you overemphasize how you support those two key audiences. Now, I've got one more to share with you, but I will share with you on the other side of it because I wanted to show you what all of these could look like in an actual playbook of change. Because, well, I know that we all have a bias towards, well, I know I need to build something and I know I need to have a core knowledge piece, but then what? And what does it mean to cross the line once you've done that? And so this is really more than anything, it's an attempt and a conversation. So don't take it as gospel in order to get through it. But I wanted to talk to what would all those elements look like in an actual program of work. So let's say you've got that initial comms. You got a drip campaign, builds anticipation. There's that marquee why moment. You really make people feel something, why we exist, the journey we're on. It's authentic, great. But what does it mean to cross the line? Well, that's that piece of documenting the journey. So if that initial comms was day one, what's the rest of the journey look like? And that's where you want to go over the course of 6 months, over a year, to call out those wins or to be vulnerable about those losses. Maybe it's in the form of an email newsletter or a Slack channel or something that comes from more of a grassroots level. But you want to document the journey to show that the change journey has just started. And let's bring out voices you wouldn't typically hear from. Let's show that you're listening and adapting on the fly as well too, because part of the documenting the journey is also reflecting from a leadership standpoint that you are seeing the change in action and you're reacting to it in the best way possible. So just a quick example of what comms looks like when you cross the line. And then you've got your traditional what. And I'm not, I'll be the first person to tell you, of course you need this. And this is the part that we all can do, and we can all do pretty well. That core message. What is the change? Who is affected? What's the plan? And in the context of a go-to-market strategy, we can put this one fancy graphic and be like, and it's this. It's like, and that's important and that's good. But then what comes after that? And you can bring any sort of combination of you need to assemble the what, whether it's about off-the-shelf content, building, borrowing, buying, doesn't really matter. Locking that in is important, but you can't stop there. And that's the key part of crossing the line. Those 7, actually 8 points that I'll talk about in a second, all come together, and it looks something like this. So you've got the what, but then you've also got what I would call yes and content for any improv fans that we have there here today. And that is, how about you help people learn how to change? Now, I just gave you a real quick tour of the science behind change and sort of the psychology of change. Why wouldn't you share that with your people? And so how do you build an extra layer of content? And I'm using the word content quite deliberately because, we do have a bias towards building things, to talk to people openly about how difficult change is, or the different tips and tricks to help you navigate that better. Another key point is just helping people understand how the business makes money, which in this day and age is a critical skill to help overcome resistance and change. In order for the business to survive the next 5 years, this is why we need to change. And obviously people get affected by it and people are at the center of that change, but it helps people empathize with the business to understand, well, I know the pain points or the gain points for how our business makes money or the commerciality of it. That's important to do. So there's an empathetic layer here of this yes and content to help people get more comfortable with change and get more comfortable with the mission that they're on. Something that you don't necessarily see in the typical what exercise. I spoke about scripting the critical moves. This is your critical audience essentials. So get to the core of those that are most affected by change and ask, they always talk about the Toyota 5 whys. This is the 5 whats, if you ask me. What do you want me to do? What does that look like? At what level? And then what specific performance moment, what do you want me to do there? Get those essentials right with those audiences. Leave no room for ambiguity, because the ambiguity is actually where the writer gets exhausted and gets tired because it's lost the plot. And you spend so much time and effort in that initial comms and what moment that you forget that by the time it reaches those people, they need even more prescription for what that actually looks like. So script those critical moves with your critical audience. And then when you get that what, you've got the how then. And I mentioned about moving from knowledge towards habits. That's the hard work piece here. But if it comes alive in something like playbooks about like, this is what it could look like. These are the artifacts of the change. This is how you know the change is working. Another key piece about change is just how visible you need to make the wins. That is why I'm a huge fan of something like scorecards, something that you could put on the wall to show people we're playing a game. Are we winning or are we losing? And in a really simplistic way, give people the actions, the habits, the behaviors, script those moves, give them the artifacts of that change, and then say, are you doing it? Are you doing more of it? Are you doing less of it? And can we as a team reflect that we are moving more in the direction of the change versus not? So there's something really inspiring here about making sure you're making this as tactical and as tangible as possible. And of course, and I just mentioned this, make sure those playbooks also go down to a leadership level. Help them understand how to help people change. It'll just make you help cascade that change a lot quicker. Now, another key part of crossing the line, more than anything else, is that you don't do this in isolation. And so this is where you bring in your guiding coalition. This is where you build your village. This is where you bring your people in. So don't feel the pressure that you need to script all of these things. This is that balance between actually the structured and the unstructured. So what you actually want to do is build all of these pieces with your guiding coalition. And there might actually be a huge component of user-generated content here. So once again, it doesn't have to be this huge investment. It actually just needs to be the right activation of the people who are affected by the change. So you can imagine your continual comms and in your journey just being your superstars on your team. Those that are change leaders, those are really leading the way. They're first movers with your change. Bring their voices out more. It doesn't all need to be overly formal and overly structured. That's the beauty of crossing the line. You're accepting that you don't really know what happens next. And that's the place that you want to document because it just motivates people more to go, the real people who are leading the change, that's the people I want to listen to. So that was a lot in there. And I hope that it made a good chunk of sense for you because it is something that I find is quite energizing if you start putting it into practice. Think about your change management initiative that you're working through right now and ask yourself, what am I doing well? Where are there gaps? And where are there huge opportunities to win? I'm more than happy to speak with you after this to really talk through what that could look like for you and in the specifics in terms of what any of this looks like in the context of the change that you're going through. All right, I said there were 8, and the last one is, well, if the rest was science, the last one is art. And that is when you think about the larger landscape of change and the amount of fatigue, less is more. And I just gave you a lot in addition. And I would say the last piece is refinement. When you think about how much change people are going through, what is the minimalist approach to doing that, but is still highly effective? So make sure you embrace the power of subtraction as well too. In reading the Cotter piece, one of the most powerful quotes that came to me was in the context of innovation. And you hear a lot of quotes about and definitions about what innovation is, but this was the first time I heard this one was that innovation is just as much about removing things as opposed to adding things. And so ask yourself, whether we're talking about the rider or the elephant or even shaping the path, what can you subtract that actually makes it enriching and more powerful? So 8 bold rules to help you cross the line. I hope that really resonates with you. I mentioned a few books over there. These were the big 4 for me that really led the way. They're all fantastic. I didn't know that the Harvard Business Review does these sort of like curation type books, especially for those of us that don't have a subscription, a digital subscription. Just go and get the book. It's probably a lot easier. But they do these great must-read books, and there's actually 2 volumes on change management. And so this is the latest volume 2. Really recommend you do it. And you see a couple of the quotes that actually come from it. So told you I'd leave you with some resources. If anything, pick up one of these books, and I think it will fundamentally change the way you approach a change. All right. We are doing fantastic for time because I talk very quickly. But I wanted to leave you with sort of the core takeaways, and more than happy to answer questions as well too on the back of this. The first is, and I can't stress this enough, is that we cannot think about change without thinking about the world around us and what's actually facing us as we approach change. You cannot ask a person to be more customer centric if you don't understand, if you can't read the room more than anything else. Read the room in terms of change and just be empathetic to it. Yes, we're all in the same boat. We're all kind of going through the same macro trends, but just be really sensitive to it. Even acknowledging that, there's a lot going on is just a really powerful way to start crossing the line. And crossing the line does require a bolder approach. More than anything else, it's just about whether you, coming back to the value system, whether you want to take the safe approach or whether you want to take this seriously and be a bit bolder. Now, that means embracing more messiness. It means embracing more vulnerability. It means embracing more of the unknown. But that doesn't mean you lose control. It just means that you start to curate it as opposed to drive it. And so just think about all the different steps that I shared with you today. Once again, it's a lot. Happy to share this deck with you afterwards as well, too. So don't feel like you have to write copious notes right now. Happy to share it all with you and talk with you more about it. But there is a boldness that you need to take on to really do change well. And hopefully I laid out some of the components of what it means to boldly cross the line. And of course, this wouldn't be a presentation about elephants if I didn't end by talking about the elephants, and that is change is just not a rational exercise. So don't over-index on the rider. Make sure you're spending enough time speaking to the elephant because, well, it's the elephant that ultimately gets us where we want to go. Lovely. Thank you so much for your time today. If you found any of this remotely interesting or relevant, would love to connect with you on LinkedIn if we haven't already connected. And well, if you find there's a live opportunity that you think is quite resonant and you could use a little extra set of hands, please do so. Get in touch with us over here as well too. I am going to quickly check. I see a few hands up. Yeah, please go ahead. Who's the first one over here? Let me just quickly share. Yes, go ahead. Is it Mridu? Am I saying that right? Can I? Oh, I don't think you can unmute. So let me just actually check the questions as well that we have there. Okay, so I'm just looking at the chat right now. If you don't mind, I'll just kind of call it out. So I'm a head of performance management for a manufacturing organization in India, and we're trying to build a culture of continuous feedback. Any experience with such change? Oh, fantastic question. I mean, you and me both, right? I'm building a culture of continuous feedback. Yeah, I think that speaks to the heart more than anything of some of the critical moves and the bright spots. I think when you're talking about culture shift more than anything, I think you really need to show that the winning is happening. You really need to show, and this is the part about finding the bright spots. So my advice to you would be is that actually gravitate to where you do have a feedback culture, because you do have a feedback culture. You just need to understand the pockets. And sometimes from a leadership angle, it's easy to say, and coming back to my little snarky comment there of like, dear everyone, let's please have a feedback culture, send, right? How do you script the critical moves? So maybe you need to give more structure. Here's a feedback model for you to play with. Why don't you try and use this feedback model 2 or 3 times this week? Script the critical moves, give people the necessary knowledge, but then the comms journey. Maybe we're having feedback conversations over the course of the month. Share them, share what they're learning, share about how difficult it is to have a feedback conversation, or even in the context of alignment or performance management. So there's flavors of feedback conversation. So I think if you look through the lens of sort of the 8 bold moves, ask yourself in that, what's one of those that I can take and run with today in the lens of feedback? Hope that was helpful. I'm going to quickly go through any other pieces of conversation. Okay, it seems we don't have any other questions, so fantastic. Well, I not only gave a power punched performance today of full stuff, but more than anything, I've given you back your time, which is the best gift of all. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. Like I said, happy to share this deck with you afterwards. And if there's anything that resonates with you, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk about it more. And these are evolving concepts as well, too. So thank you so much and have a great day.